The movie is set in Antarctica at a research base. A guide named Jerry wakes up his dogs in the morning to feed them fish. At this moment, an airplane lands, the pilot of which is his longtime girlfriend, Kathy. The girl brought to the base Doctor of Geological Sciences and his research equipment, the unloading of which is handled by our hero's buddy mechanical engineer Charlie. A little later, at a poker game, Jerry learns that the doctor's goal is to find a meteorite that has fallen near Mount Melbourne. The road to this mountain is on thin ice, so the all-terrain vehicle can't get there. The only way to get to the base of the mountain is by dog sled. Jerry says that it is too dangerous to make such a crossing at the end of the season, but the expedition leader insists on carrying it out. Jerry agrees, and then leaves to prepare for the crossing. The next morning, Jerry gives the doctor a brief briefing and introduces him to the dogs. In the first pair are the leaders of the sled, the dog Maya and Old Jack. Behind them are Shorty and the young but promising Max. Next are the twins Truman and Dewey, and closing the sled, the sturdy Eskimo huskies Shadow and Buck. After taking a photo as a souvenir and saying goodbye to the team, our group sets off. The doctor has taken a lot of heavy equipment with him, so the sledge is heavily loaded. Soon the section with solid ground ends, and our heroes have to cross on thin ice. Jerry decides to change the type of hitch so that the dogs can go in a fan, because this way the load on the ice is significantly reduced, and in case one of the dogs falls through the ice, it will not drag the whole sled with it. When they reach the glacier, Jerry hands control of the sled to the doctor and goes ahead to plot the route. Having found a crevasse, the man commands Maya to turn left. But young Max does not obey, and takes half of the dogs behind him. As a consequence, the sled, along with the scientist, falls into the rift. Jerry immediately rushes to the sled. The man commands the dogs to drag the sled as hard as they can. In this way the scientist and all his cargo are saved. In the evening, our heroes make camp. The scientist checks the route, and Jerry treats the wounds of his dogs. The next day travelers stay at the foot of the mountain. Here our group plans to spend a week searching for the meteorite. At this time, a specialist from the weather center contacts the base and informs about the approach of a large cyclone, and advises to urgently return all members of the expedition. Over the radio, this information is transmitted to Jerry. Our hero immediately decides to abort the mission, but the scientist does not want to just give up. Davis talks to Jerry, and they decide to stay another day. The search begins, and Jerry sets up a safe route while the scientist scrutinizes the rocks. Soon, luck smiles on the man and he finds a great specimen. Afterward, our group heads straight back to base. On the way Jerry notices a bloody trail of one of the dogs, and stops the sled to treat Old Jack's wound. At this moment, the scientist on the radio tries to contact the base, but the snow under his feet falls through, and the man falls on thin ice. A moment later, the scientist falls through the ice. Jerry gives Maya a rope, and commands her to crawl to the scientist. Again, with the help of the dogs, the man is saved. By this time our heroes are overtaken by a storm. In addition, the scientist has received severe frostbite, and he must be urgently brought to the base. Jerry approaches Maya, makes her the leader, and commands her to lead the sled home. In such difficult conditions our heroes have to make a long way back to the base. In the evening, Katie hears dogs barking and notices a sled. Clever Maya finds her way home, and the group makes it safely to the base. Our scientist needs urgent medical help, and the head of the base decides to fly the whole team to McMurdoch Station. Unfortunately, there is not enough room on the plane, so Harrison suggests leaving the dogs at the base and coming back for them when the new shift arrives for wintering. Jerry wants to stay and look after the dogs, but the supervisor is against it, as the guy has got severe frostbite on his hands and needs medical help too. Before leaving, Charlie tightens the dogs' collars so they won't get loose. Then the whole group leaves the base to the barking of the dogs. On the way, Jerry passes out and comes to his senses at the station. The guy learns from his friends that because of weather conditions all wintering sites are cancelled, and the dogs remain abandoned at the base. The boy strongly disagrees with this decision. Jerry goes to the command headquarters to get permission for the last flight. But, unfortunately, the commander can't go for it, because there are still 10 groups of polar explorers at other bases who are waiting for their evacuation, and they will be the first to be evacuated. And by the time the turn comes to the dogs, there will be severe frosts, which means that further flights will be impossible. After arriving home, our hero starts to visit the offices of officials in the hope of getting an evacuation for his dogs, but the guy is refused everywhere, because no one wants to risk so much to save the animals. In the last turn, Jerry decides to ask for help to scientist Davis. The guy asks to finance the evacuation with money from the scientific fund, because it is only thanks to the dogs managed to find that valuable meteorite. The scientist also refuses Jerry, because to fly there now, it's just suicide. The man suggests the guy to try to forget about this unpleasant incident. Meanwhile, back at the Antarctic base, the dogs had already spent 15 days alone. By this time almost all the dogs had managed to get their collars off, and only Max and old Jack remained on the chain. Chasing a seagull, Max also manages to get off the chain, and the whole pack rushes off in pursuit of the bird. Jack is left with only Maya, who tries to somehow lift the leader, but the dog is already too weak. Maya licks Jack goodbye and then joins the flock. The dogs manage to catch a few seagulls with the help of an ambush that clever Maya has devised. The dogs bring all the captured birds to Maya, and thus choose her as their new leader. On the 50th day of wandering, the dogs notice the northern lights in the sky. One of the twins chases the reflections in the snow, causing him to fall off a cliff without noticing the ledge. Dewey is left lying on the ground from his injuries, and the other dogs come to him and lie down beside him. In the morning, the whole pack wakes up and we see that Dewey didn't survive the night, but the dogs need to move on. Maya leads everyone away, and only Max doesn't leave his friend to the last. Due to a violent storm, Max fights off the pack and loses track of them. At this time, Jerry had already stopped looking for funding for his expedition, and had taken a job as an instructor at a kiddie pool. One of the days Kathy came to work with him. The girl learned that the guy had given up the next polar expedition, and so she decided to visit him. From their conversation, it becomes clear that Jerry is still reeling from the loss of the dogs. He couldn't get them back and feels guilty about it. Kathy says that hiding and worrying forever is not the answer, because Jerry needs to come to terms with what happened and stop blaming himself. After this conversation, Jerry arrives at the kennel where his dogs were raised. The guy wants to apologize for his act to the kennelologist, but the man says that there is nothing to apologize for. The kennelologist advises the guy to find something that will help him find peace of mind as soon as possible, and regretting what happened is not the answer. Upon arrival home, Jerry prepares warm clothes and also takes all his savings. The guy decides to get to the South Pole on his own. On the way, the guy stops by a gala evening, where scientist Davis is given an award for the found meteorite. At the end of his speech, the man thanks all the employees of the Antarctic base, and says that without their help he would not be able to stand on this stage now. The scientist sees his savior in the audience, and goes over to talk to him. Jerry congratulates the man on receiving the grant, and also tells him about his crazy plan. In the evening, while putting his son to bed, the man notices a child's drawing of a dog sled. Afterward, Davis goes into his office to calculate the expenses required for a new polar expedition. Meanwhile, the dogs had already lived 152 days without humans. During this time, the pack managed to find a storehouse with provisions, and Max was able to return to the base alone. One day, while walking around the area, Max notices the frozen carcass of a killer whale washed ashore. This prey is guarded by another predator, so Max was unable to approach it. However, his barking was heard by the rest of the pack and they came running to help. Together the dogs managed to drive the sea lion away, but unfortunately Maya got a serious injury to her hind leg. This time the pack did not abandon the leader. The dogs regularly brought food to Maya, and they chose Max as their new leader. At this time Jerry arrives in a New Zealand port city, and icebreakers bound for Antarctica depart from this location. At a local bar, Jerry is also joined by Kathy and Charlie. They have been hired by the scientist Davis for his new expedition. For this expedition, the man had to allocate money from a scientific grant. Joining their efforts, the guys made a long and difficult journey to get to one of the nearest polar bases. Here Charlie had a girlfriend working, and so the guy knew about the rover. with the help of which our heroes manage to get to the necessary station. Upon arrival at the station, Jerry immediately approaches the dog chain. The first one he finds is Jack, and he begins to feel sad. The guy goes further and discovers a torn collar. From what he sees, the whole group has hope. With a sudden movement, Jerry lifts the entire chain, which has all the other collars broken off as well. At that moment, a dog barking sounds. Max appears on the horizon, and with him the rest of the pack. The whole team runs to hug the surviving dogs. Jerry sees 5 dogs in front of him and realizes that not all of them survived. Later, during loading, Max refuses to jump into the all-terrain vehicle. The dog leads the guy to where Maya is. By this time, the dog is too weakened, but thanks to Max, he is still alive. Our team picks up the dogs and heads home. This is the end of the movie. Thank you all for watching this movie to the end. Give this video a like. Write in the comments what you think about this movie, and see you in new videos.